Now, before our next conversation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a bit of intel to tell you. And obviously, get your selfies in now, because if you haven't taken a photo, it has not happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I want to bring you a little bit of an insight from a yearly public opinion study, which is done by the German Marshall Fund of the United States in collaboration with the Bertelsmann Foundation of North America. Now, this survey is called the Transatlantic Trends. It's a comprehensive public opinion study which provides insight, among other things, in public opinion on global order, on transatlantic relations, and also strategic challenges like China and, of course, Ukraine. So, what we found from this year's Transatlantic Trends study, 2022, a cooperation, a consensus, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. A consensus on the core issues for transatlantic cooperation, namely NATO, and also the US's involvement and European security. So let's just have a little look at what this actually means. So according to the report, in the eyes of the respondents who were asked the question, the world looks very unipolar. You can see the US is by far seen as the most influential actor when it comes to leading the way. 64%. But just compare this in 5 years' time, how the respondents felt when it comes to the United States' leading the way in terms of its sphere of influence. If we have a look at the slide that shows us the projections for 5 years' time, well, as you see, a whopping decrease in the sphere of influence for the United States, a massive decrease. So I want you to bear that in mind when we go into our next panel, down by 27%. This is how respondents feel the US's sphere of influence will be in the next 5 years or so. And it's China that gains, also Russia actually, but China is the predominant gainer in terms of spheres of influence. So it is really worth bearing that in mind, how the respondents of this survey, this yearly public opinion survey, feel about what is going to happen in the next 5 years' time. Don't have nightmares, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, for our next panel, with all of this in mind, please welcome back on stage Michał Baranowski, the co-chair of the Warsaw Security Forum, for his panel, Late or Just in Time. Over to you, sir.
Well, fantastic. Welcome, everyone. I think I was introduced, but Michał Baranowski. I have really fantastic panel to discuss the alliance that keeps us safe. And we are going to discuss here how safe we are, what we need to do to get there and be even more safe. And the right title is NATO late or just in time. I'm not going to go into the details introducing our panelists, but it's wonderful to have Baiba Braže with us, Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, Minister of Defense of Estonia, Hanno Pevkur, and Anna Wieslander from Atlantic Council, Head of Stockholm Office, Northern Europe Director as well, and a long-time friend. Minister, I would like to start with you, actually, because you are, frankly, the closest to the action. How are we doing specifically in terms of the speed of the adaptation of the alliance? The alliance is changing. The Madrid summit not only introduced the new strategic concept, there were also a number of decisions in terms of strengthening the eastern flank and the alliance as a whole, but at the same time, we are having our Russian adversaries adjusting as well. How are we doing with this speed of adjustments? Are our front line and front door, as you say, safe enough to our NATO's house?
Well, thank you for having me in this panel. So definitely is one of the most interesting panels in terms that are we ready enough, or are we there where we want to be? Well, yes, I've used that metaphor many times, that like the closest countries to Russia are the front doors, or the main door to NATO. And when we don't have this door closed, all the other doors are open anyway in the house. So when we take the normal house, then we all understand that, you close the front door or the main entrance to the house, and all the other doors inside of the house are anyway open. Normally we don't close those doors. So inside of the NATO we have the same principle, that it should be closed. Today it is closed. Now is the question then, when there is an intruder, when someone wants to intrude to your house, are we ready to kick him out from the first moment, from the first meter, from the first inch? So this is the core value of Article 5. And then when we take NATO, then we know that there are different plans. We are not late yet, I would say. But we have to speed up. And to speed up, and also when we take the Madrid summit conclusions, then from our point of view, the first and foremost, the regional plans have to be there as soon as possible, because the situation has changed, and this is for sure that the regional plans are like the must thing to have. The second point is that every country close to Russia has to invest a lot more. So we are doing that, so increasing to 2.8% next year, 3.1% in 24, and also in total volumes, it will be increased a lot. But also, we have to understand from the allies to deliver the decisions made in Madrid. For instance, we agreed with Brits that they will allocate a brigade, so we don't have time until the next year, or until the end of the next year. We need to start training together with these units. We need to start planning together with these units. So to conclude your question, we are not late yet, but we have to speed up.
Great. Well, we'll come back to this in more specifics, because I really want to drill down to the level of forces and the kind of forces we need to have in Estonia, in the Baltic states, in Poland, and throughout the eastern flank, or as the Polish general, chief of Polish defense, General Andrzejczak, talks about the eastern front. What we actually will need to be secure. But let me turn to Assistant Secretary Braže and have your view from inside of the alliance. Post-Madrid, you are a NATO official, so I'm not going to ask you to criticize NATO, but if you could give us a sense of what you are relaxed about and what you are worried about in terms of the speed of the adaptation and implementation of Madrid's decisions as we are coming close to the winter.
Dziękuję, panie Michale. Dziękuję, Polska. Dziękuję, Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation. Wspaniale jest być znowu w Warszawie.
Bardzo dziękujemy. So the rest of the panel will do in Polish.
But going back to your question, and I think the very sort of premise of saying late or in time is slightly off with regards to NATO. NATO, throughout the years, throughout the very foundation, has been adapting to this necessary level of the threats to be able to respond to the threats. And that is what we are doing at 30 and soon at 32 as we speak now. It's the only political military alliance of its kind. And when I say that, it actually means something. So it's not just about words in the strategic concept. It's not just about the concept of deterrence and defense for the Euro-Atlantic area. It's about our military, our political leaders, our forces on the ground, literally implementing changes as we speak. And there will never be the time when we say, okay, this is perfect, this is ready. Because adaptation is constant. So, and we all know indeed that forces in the Baltics are being built up. There are very clear decisions that the leaders have made, that the military leaders are implementing. The way we train, the readiness of the forces, control command, everything is changing. And why? Because the threats to the Euro-Atlantic security have increased. There are no direct military threats to NATO members, but the overall situation obviously is completely different. So on the basis of that, we have political unity, we have military unity, and we are implementing very practical changes. So for example, when you see NATO exercising, when we announce, for example, there is an exercise, Neptune Strike, where the command of a aircraft carrier is given to Supreme Allied Commander Europe, so-called transfer of authority, TOAD. It's a huge change. It had never been done in NATO before. So the whole US carrier strike group comes under the command of Secure. Plus, there are other forces exercising with them. The way they built up this interoperability, the communications, the way they exercise, it's completely new. It had not been done before. So we can speak through all the domains. So changes are taking place as we speak. So if it's in time, it's difficult to say, but NATO is responding to the real-time situations that we have in Euro-Atlantic security currently.
Thank you very much. We'll come back also to the types of threats we face, because you know the issue of nuclear tactical weapons being used has been raised already, and it's certainly the most worrying and dangerous weapon that is in the Russian arsenal. But before we do that, I actually want to go across the Baltic Sea to our friends in Sweden. Anna, the last time Sweden was part of an alliance, formal alliance, I understand was during Napoleonic Wars just over 200 years ago. What happened? Why are you joining us? And more importantly, maybe this is pretty clear, but you know, what is Sweden hoping to get from the alliance, and what is it bringing to the alliance in terms of your Swedish and Finnish capabilities? Over to you.
Thank you so much, and it's lovely to be back here at the Warsaw Security Forum. Also to be in Warsaw, which is really at the front line of this major war in Europe, so it feels very important to be here. And Sweden and Finland, we did the same assessment, two things really that shifted this, as you say, many years of, for Sweden, hundreds of years of military non-alignment, and for Finland also many years. And it was one, of course, the level of the threat, the fact that Russia full-scale invaded another country, a neighbor, that really shook us. In combination with the so-called treaties on security guarantees that Russia proposed in December, which also kind of gave a feeling that we are really entering a very dangerous phase here if this is what Russia wants, as was described in these draft treaties. And I think what both Sweden and Finland will bring to NATO. So, of course, this is why we felt that being a close partner to NATO, the position that we have had since 2014, it was not enough for our security. We needed that those formal guarantees, and that's why we have applied for joining NATO. But what would we bring? I think it's important, both politically. I think it's worth underlining that we are, you know, solid democracy, stable economies, EU members since 1995. I think that kind of will help solidify a Western core, a Western platform, which is really needed now as we are also looking globally at the fight between democracy, autocracy, for instance, it's in line with the treaty of NATO, and it's part of defending the rule-based order. So I think that Sweden and Finland will help with that, and in practical terms help bridge also between NATO and the EU, all the initiatives that we see there. Militarily, we are interoperable as many allies, I would argue, since we have been working closely with NATO since the mid-90s. And we have advanced military, not huge. Of course, we are not super big countries, but Finland, for instance, a very strong army, heavy brigades, kept its conscription. Sweden has a strong jet fighter fleet and also submarines. For instance, we both come with a good knowledge on Russia, since that's a neighbor which we also can bring in, and data collection intel on those terms. So I think we can contribute in several ways to the alliance security.
Thank you. Yes, and as you pointed out, you are very capable when in maritime domain, and of course the Baltic Sea with Swedish and Finnish accession will become a NATO lake. And as we were talking about right before the panel, a lake that is getting quite a bit of activity right now with the sabotage of the pipeline. So your capabilities, underwater capabilities, I think are very important for the alliance indeed, and we can explore this as well. And I would ask the audience, the participants, to think also of the questions. We'll definitely turn to a conversation with us all in the room. But before we do that, I wanted to focus for us for a second on Ukraine and what the war in Ukraine means for the alliance. And Minister, maybe I can ask you first. Given Estonia's per capita, I think you are on the very top, contribution to Ukraine military. Help us think through Tallinn's perspective of not only why the fight in Ukraine is key for Estonia's or Polish, being here, security. What can we do specifically to address it? And if I can then add to this a little bit too, I mean, we need to be talking, we need to discuss, even though it's maybe a bit of a tricky subject, Ukraine's request to join NATO. So Estonian government, along with 8 others from the flank, has come out publicly. So if you could give us a perspective on the both military and political support for Ukraine in the NATO context that you would foresee that is necessary in the coming months and years too.
Yes, so I'm probably not very original here, as we have heard in the opening speeches, very great thoughts about that. And I totally in the same line with these thoughts, and definitely I'm more than happy to multiply that once again, that we are not fighting in Ukraine for Ukraine. We are fighting for the free world, and we are fighting for the rule-based world. And as I mentioned or said that many times to different journalists, that at the moment we are fighting democracy versus aggressor, who is who thinks that he can take away someone's freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of your own independence, and the freedom of decide yourself and your future. So, and this is something we cannot tolerate, and we cannot allow to continue and to happen. So this is why it's not important only for Ukraine and Ukrainians, but all the Western world and democratic world. On military point of view, definitely we all understand that every tank or howitzer which is destroyed there in Ukraine decreases also the capabilities of Russia towards NATO. So, and this is obvious reason why we have to help Ukraine, and this was one of the understandings what have been or what has been in Estonian society for a very long time, that even before the large-scale invasion or escalation of the war since 2014 happened on 24th of February. That even before that we sent already some aid to Ukraine, and the first javelins helping to keep Kiev were exactly because of that. That, you know, when you take the price of the one javelin comparing to the price of the tank, so we all understand that this is exactly what we have to do. That we have to give help to Ukraine, that they can freedom their own country. They can, from the military point of view, weaken Russian military. And when we take all the numbers of the tanks, thousands of tanks or howitzers or other equipment, military equipment, then we all understand that Russia is capable of restoring all that, but it takes time. Now is the question of estimation, that how long it takes. Is it like 6 months, 2 years, 6 years? My estimation is that it happens rather sooner than later. And this is why we also in NATO and in all over the alliance, we have to speed up our production. I was very happy to hear that also the companies present here said that they are ready to, or they have already increased the production. And this is exactly what we need. We need to fill the stocks. We need to increase the production. But what we need to give also to the industry is the confirmation and certainty that yes, the contracts are there and the offer and we will buy new stuff, because otherwise private companies will not increase their production just that someone will say that maybe we will buy something more. No, we have to put the orders in place, and then we will get also the results. But we have to fill the stocks, and we have to be ready for different also asymmetrical attacks. Probably we don't have much time to discuss and to go very deeply with the Nord Stream case, but what was mentioned by our Swedish colleagues and friends, and we discussed backstage that when we have air policing in Baltic states, then maybe we should also have sub-policing in Baltic Sea.
Absolutely, you heard it here, sub-policing, and the idea is that we'll just to explore that a little bit. Well, this is where Sweden will come in with their great submarine capabilities to help us be sure that we know what's going on, not only above, but also below water. Assistant Secretary, I wanted to ask you about the nuclear issue. NATO is a nuclear alliance. We are now being threatened by Putin with nuclear weapons, whether it's tactical or maybe even beyond. What should be our response? How are these threats being received in Brussels?
Indeed, we all have heard this irresponsible nuclear saber-rattling, and indeed, that is something that nobody is happy with. And we take it seriously. At the same time, I have to remind every time and again audiences, and including Russian audiences, we still engage with Russian audiences via our social media channels and elsewhere, that Russia herself in January signed the P5 statement of the UN Security Council, saying that the nuclear war cannot be won and it should not be fought. That was Russian own policy statement. Nothing has changed. So in that respect, of course, we take it serious. It's irresponsible to talk like that, but we also know that we will be ready, and we are ready for all scenarios. And I'm not going to speculate what type of scenarios and so on and so forth these questions are asked, but it's just not done. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the audience, and I want to, and by the way, the microphone should be somewhere in the back, so either go there or catch my hand to, oh, there we go, somewhere there. Oh, there we go. There's the microphone. But before we do that, Anna, I wanted to ask you about your other aspect of expertise. Besides being a Swedish defense and security analyst, you are also a transatlantic expert, transatlantic relations expert. And of course, the health of NATO depends on the health of the transatlantic relationship, on America's engagement in Europe, and there is some trade-off, potentially, between what's going on in the European theater and what's going on in the Asian theater. But I wanted to, so the topic that I would like for you to address is, when you talk with your colleagues in DC, to what extent, and when you look also at political developments inside Washington, how relaxed or concerned are you about America staying the course, not only under this administration, but not only after the midterms election, but also after 2024 presidential election? That's one big factor. And the other factor is, of course, China and Taiwan. How are we doing transatlantically to manage this engagement of the US and also burden sharing in this time of really global volatility? As the title of the panel suggests, we are in the global great power competition. So looking at the other side of the Atlantic, how relaxed or concerned are you?
Well, there are a few observations you can make there, I think. I think no one is really relaxed when you talk about the presidential elections of 2024. No one can rule out the return of another Trump administration or something similar, which would mean, a big strain on the transatlantic relation as it was, a lot of political turbulence, and the shadow of, to be frank, also NATO's future. We know that now, that was on the table. But at least the question of burden sharing perhaps getting even more acute again, even though now Europe is increasing defense spending, but will it be enough? So those are questions that we have to live with, I think, until we know better. And we need to be aware of that. And I think it's an important signal to European countries that we cannot relax and lean back. We have seen a lot of US engagement, US leadership now. During the Russian build-up and the invasion, the US is leading on support, both economically, military, and humanitarian to Ukraine, for instance. So once again, Europe is leaning on the US. But we cannot be satisfied with that. We really have to do our homework. And that's also a long-term strategic question as you raise, because I think when you talk around in Washington, you have, yes, it's about Russia and China, but you still will find those who say, no, it's not about Russia long-term, it's only about China. Possibly it's about Russia because Russia will align with China. That will make Russia long-term interesting still, but there is this very strong tendency that the strategic challenge, the one who can really challenge the US as its number one position, is China. And so that will not go away. So even though if you have a benevolent US after 2024, resources could be strained for us. And we need to be a better first responder. We need to be stronger deterrence capability here in order to secure our part of the world. That's really important. Now, the Taiwan issue, I think we need to follow closely. We do not know there where the timetable will be. What I've heard more recently is that people think it might come sooner than later, because China is also looking at, perhaps China is peaking its power earlier than it had estimated before, which also changes its timetable when it comes to Taiwan. So we need to be engaged in that as well, and I think it's symptomatic. I was at NATO the other day, and someone said, well, if Sweden and Finland were closest partners before, perhaps it's Australia and Japan next. So that's also a shifting way of looking at things as we are connecting our security.
Absolutely. Some in Washington, D.C. are talking about one theater. both putting Europe and Asia from their perspective in one space. Let me go to questions, and if you can just briefly introduce yourself, direct a question to a specific person if you can, and we'll take as many as we can. Right. Sir.
So my name is Jakub Knop. I'm from University of Warsaw. So first I'd like to thank to all the participants for their fascinating remarks. And I'd like to quote one of my favorite political leaders in Europe, Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, who in an interview for Financial Times said that in the event of Russian invasion, Estonia would be wiped off the map. I think that she meant that it is time to employ a posture of deterrence by denial, and that this is the only way forward for the countries on the eastern flank of NATO. And so I'd like to know what are your thoughts on how could NATO contribute into creating such a posture and basically deny Russian entrance to the Baltic states. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I can sharpen it, what would be the force that you think could provide deterrence by denial in Estonia and Baltic countries? But before you answer, please, let's take a second question as well, because we are short on time.
Hi, good afternoon. Alessandro Marrone. I'm the head of defense program, Istituto Affari Internazionali, IAI, Rome. Thank you to our panelists. Last year, NATO and the EU were working on a new joint declaration. Then the war arrived. There's been the NATO strategic concept and the EU strategic compass. So my question is, what's the status and perspective of a NATO-EU joint declaration? It would be tremendously helpful to consolidate the Western Bloc today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. And is there a third question? Yes, great.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Iverson. I'm from Hong Kong, a columnist at the Estonian newspaper Postimees. I have a question regarding the Chinese espionage within NATO countries. A year ago in Estonia, there was a maritime researcher who was charged for working for the Chinese Communist Party, and he was jailed, and he got security clearance from the NATO. So my question to the panel is how to ensure that the NATO operations can prevent and to deter the Chinese infiltration within the EU countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And perhaps the last question, or maybe the last two questions. Yeah, I see you, sir. Barely, but I can.
Denis Kolesnik, consultant from Paris, and actually I have a quick question to Anne Wieslander, excuse me. What will Nordefco become when your country and your colleagues from Finland will become NATO members? And maybe a short question to Madam Assistant Secretary Baiba Braže. It's actually about Ukraine's application to NATO, and as a person who worked a decade ago at the NATO liaison office in Kiev, Ukraine applied for NATO in 2008 and right now. And actually, we continue to hear more or less the same approach towards Ukraine. I mean, especially this reluctance or reticence, as we say, can be observed in Paris, where I live, and in Western Europe as well. But will we be able to finally provide a solution for Ukraine and finally secure this country and secure the continent from further Russian invasions, maybe? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your brilliant contributions. My name is Emmanuel Zingeris. I'm last 3 decades in Lithuanian Parliament in Foreign Affairs Committee. My question will be related to our direct neighborhood to Belarus and to the footnote that from the 20th of February, Russian army continued to be there, and after 24th, it was heavily used against Ukraine. And now Belarus is overbooked with Russian army and Kaliningrad. And now we have a 100-kilometer gap. I will not call that, dear Michał, a corridor, my goodness. But it's no corridors between Poland and Lithuania. But the gap of 100 kilometers in Suwałki should be fortified, not looking of the new possibilities of aeroplanes to cover that. So how to say, what we should say about future demilitarization, possible demilitarization of Belarus and Kaliningrad region? Thank you.
Thank you.
And no changes, any border, no changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a last question there? Okay, absolutely. Yes. We'll do that, and then we'll have to pick and choose.
Aleksandra Krzysztoszek, Euractiv Poland. I have a question to the Assistant Secretary General. there are going to be the election of a new Secretary General of NATO next year. Do you expect any change in NATO policy, not only towards Ukraine, but also towards other areas of NATO activity relating to the change in power in the alliance? Thank you very much.
Super, thank you very much. So we are a little bit over time, but I think we'll definitely do the round of answers. So Assistant Secretary, let's go with you. And if you have any closing thoughts as well, let's put it right now because we'll finish right after your contributions.
With regard to next Secretary General, we have Secretary General and he's going very strong, as we all know, so we stick at that. On Ukraine's membership, quite clearly, as you rightly said, Ukraine submitted application for the second time. And for now, we are led by Article 10 of the Washington Treaty, NATO's founding treaty, which says that every European country that contributes to the security of Euro-Atlantic space and where allies agree to admit can become a member. So allies will have to look at these parameters and we will see. No doubt about Ukraine that she is contributing to Euro-Atlantic security. And as Minister said, as we all know, it's not only Ukrainians are fighting for us and self-defending themselves with, of course, our all allies and world's help. They're also standing up for the UN Charter. I would like to note that this is the basic instrument of international law where more than 190 countries have legally ratified it, committed to it, which provides for territorial integrity, sovereignty, for the right to self-defend. It's crucial, and Ukrainians are doing that with arms in their hands. They are standing up for concrete articles of the UN Charter. And it's really something unique in the history of the UN. And on NATO-EU joint declaration, indeed, the time of the war is not the time for joint declarations and drafting sessions and so on and so forth. So we are united in actions and we work with our EU colleagues. Once the time comes for another political declaration or some other verbalizing of the common principles, common commitments, common everything, it will be there. And posthumous question on Chinese spying and infiltration. I think we have an intel track also here in the Warsaw Security Forum where the intelligence specialists are discussing these issues. But there is no doubt about the fact that Chinese activities within NATO countries are ongoing, be it on cyber, be it in influence activities through information space, where China has clearly become a hostile actor together with Russia. As you rightly pointed out, various infiltration activities, those are ongoing. So it's our internal allied societal resilience, understanding the risks, the responsibility of the governments, the responsibility of civil military intelligence services that work within NATO on daily basis. We have 70 military services working together on daily basis at NATO, sharing information, sharing threats, understanding each other. That these concerns, this information is shared, that they are identified, and so on and so forth. So I would also like to say that going forwards, on support to Ukraine till the end of the sacred war, till the victory of Ukraine, the discussion on defense spending, new defense investment pledge, whatever summit decisions we need to make, the enhanced forward presence, the unity of all allies is going to continue to be crucial. We are united and we need to stay united. And with this, I'll also thank Poland for its contributions to the transatlantic security, but also to Ukraine, to Ukrainian people here in Poland and elsewhere.
Thank you very much. The clock started blinking in various colors, which probably means that we have a little bit less time than I hoped. Minister and then Anna.
Yes, I tried to keep it short. I will address just two questions. First, espionage, and then the fourth, what we need to have this deterrence by denial. First, regarding the espionage, the message is very clear and simple and short. So don't play with us. So we will capture anyone who is trying to find any secrets from us, and our services are good, and we will send you out. We will or send you back, however you want it. But you will not then, or you will end up in the prison. So clear message. So don't play with us. Second, the deterrence by denial. Well, for sure we know what to do. This is not a question. So we have Admiral Bauer sitting here, who is leading the military committee of Chief of Defense and of NATO, and there is a clear understanding what we need to do. And now is the question that can we speed up all these processes? I mentioned already the regional plans. We have to deliver also the Madrid summit conclusions, but to be very concrete, when we have a clear understanding that what the regional plans say, then we can start to exercise those plans and to execute these plans. We need pre-positioning in close neighborhood of Russia. And we need a clear understanding that if there is a trespassing of the border or any threat to our territory, of NATO's territory, we will fight back from the first meter, from the first inch, and we will not wait. Because when we take the last comment, when we take Ukraine, we see that basically Russia has strategically lost this war already. And because what they wanted to have is they wanted to weaken NATO. They failed. NATO is stronger than ever. And NATO is more united than ever. And additionally, we will have two very strong countries soon in NATO, Finland and Sweden. And Russia has to face the truth that they have 1,324 more kilometers to deal with NATO. So, yes, we are ready. Yes, we know what to do, what we have to do. Now we just need to speed up all these processes.
Just do it, right? Nike. Anna, for last minute for you to close us.
Oh, thank you. Well, I agree very much with what the Defense Minister just said on deterrence by denial, and that Sweden and Finland joining NATO, we really have a good opportunity here to take some major steps on that. You mentioned the subwater environment, but we also have the airspace, we have air and missile defense, we have the Patriot systems, we have a lot of things that we can contribute with, fill the gaps and connect the dots if we look at the Baltic Sea as one area that we need to defend together. And then there was a question on NORDEFCO, that's the Nordic Defense Cooperation, Regional Defense Cooperation. And I think this is, Sweden and Finland joining NATO will really take away the last hurdles, I think, to explore that defense cooperation further. For instance, when it comes to joint procurement or security of supply, which has been some issues before. And this could work as a framework for regional development within NATO, within the larger framework. So I really think this has a bright future ahead.
Thank you very much, Anna, also for being concise. So, we have Ukraine that is protecting us, that is the shield of Europe for the moment. They provide us time, and I would focus on what Minister has been doing. We now know what we need to be doing, what to do. We actually have to deliver on this. Really, between now and Vilnius, it's the similar situation as it was between the Wales and Warsaw summit. So there we have work cut out for us. Please join me in thanking our excellent panel. And we'll be back with a president. Thank you.